to make sure. Okay, so thanks again for having us. Toby and I are excited to be here and talk to you all about homelessness. I hope that we tell you some things that might surprise you, and we're making a lot of good progress. Our community is in a really, really good place as far as collaboration goes and that sort of thing. So excited to be here. And if you have questions, and maybe you all already do this, but if you have questions, please drop them in the chat. Happy to answer questions about anything you might have a question on. So we have a community vision. So homelessness, we have a large coordinated response in our community, which I feel very fortunate about. Our partners work together incredibly well. So this picture here that you're looking at is what we consider our housing crisis system of care. So when someone has a housing crisis, either they're about to lose their housing or they have already lost their housing, this is the system that really jumps into action and helps them. So one thing I want you to take away is that our community has a very coordinated response. When someone is in need of housing assistance, this system is what kind of jumps into action. So a couple of years ago, we kind of revamped how homelessness worked in our community, how homeless services work in our community. And the Homeless Coalition, along with our partners, came up with a community vision. So our community vision is a vibrant community where every individual has the place to call home and the resources to live their best life. Whatever that means, home may not look the same for everyone. The resources to live their best life may also not look the same. And so we wanted to really have that be all encompassing. And we feel like the vibrant community is really important because we are part of a community. A real shift that I think we have made over the past, I would say, year is that really understanding how homelessness impacts others outside of social services. So, and understanding that, we will never nonprofit our way out of homelessness. And so we need community partners like all of you, and municipalities, involves everyone. So I want to tell you just a little bit about, not go into too much detail about the system of care we have. So we consider everyone in this graphic as part of the solution to homelessness. So the stakeholders we have are cities and counties, churches, people experiencing homelessness, businesses, funders, really anyone in our community who has a stake. So Daryl mentioned that, we've talked a little bit about the fact that homelessness does impact economic development. I absolutely agree with that. I think if you have people who are experiencing housing insecurity or who don't have a place to call home, then it has a negative impact on businesses, on neighborhoods, and we want to work together with you to understand what your needs are and how we can support you in that way. We do have a planning board in our community. So that would be the COC board, the Continuum of Care board. And they are a planning board. So that board has representatives from elected officials. So it has the county judge, the mayors of Fort Worth and Arlington, county judge of Parker County, and then also has a lot of other leaders. So United Way has a spot on the board, Fort Worth Housing Solutions, law enforcement, funders, churches. So we really restructured that board to have a wide array of entities on that board, all who have a stake in a solution to homelessness. The Homeless Coalition is the backbone organization. So we lead the community effort and are the catalyst for change in our community. So we carry out what the planning board wants to do. We don't actually provide direct services. We actually work with all of the organizations that you probably think of when you think about homelessness, like Presbyterian Night Shelter, is a great example. Then we have our providers. Those are organizations who actually provide homeless services directly to people experiencing homelessness. And the providers are organizations who homelessness is their main objective, their main mission, ending homelessness. So it could be homeless prevention providers. So that would be providers who are actually helping people who are facing eviction and needing to stay in their housing. So that on that side of things, our outreach teams reach out to people who are actually living on the streets. Emergency shelters are, I think, what people typically think of when they think of homelessness is our emergency shelters. Our shelters have probably been around for the longest if you look at all these interventions. And then, of course, on the other end, we have our housing programs. So we believe that housing is the solution to homelessness. There may be other things happening with people, but ultimately housing is the solution to homelessness. And so we are working hard to get people out of homelessness as quickly as we can. And then our partners are other systems that work with us. Their target population is not necessarily people who are experiencing homelessness, but they are systems that we need. So behavioral health, for example, is MHMR. Healthcare is primarily JPS, workforce solutions. Criminal justice, one thing that we're working on right now, we know that often we can have a revolving door between jail and the homeless shelters. And so right now we're working on different initiatives to see how can we stop that revolving door from turning. So those are all really, really important partners that we have that we rely on as a system, and who contribute really, really important services to the system. I think I share this slide because sometimes it may feel like, I see someone standing on the corner. Why isn't anyone doing anything about homelessness? And I share this slide because I want you to know that our community is. We have all these invested parties. Like I said, it's a very coordinated response. Our partners are very, very responsive to as needs change. So that's how homeless response works in our system. Toby, feel free to jump in anytime you want to. A little bit about the Homeless Coalition. So our mission is to lead the community solution to homelessness by serving as a catalyst for community change. Kind of big. Like I said, we don't provide direct services. We view our clients as the community and as our partners. So we work with all the organizations who directly serve people experiencing homelessness. We have our shared vision, we have a mission. And so moving toward that vision is really important, helping partners set strategic actions and goals to move us toward that vision. Something else that the Homeless Coalition, I think, has really turned external as well and started to work a lot more with businesses and neighborhoods. So like I mentioned, if you want to learn more about the issue of homelessness, or if your neighborhood, for example, is having an issue with homelessness, we are happy to meet with you to understand what your concerns are and learn how we can work with you. So I think in the past, we kind of said, a few years ago, neighborhoods, that's just kind of part of living in a big city. And that's really not our approach now. So as a neighborhood, we want to know, like I said, how we can support you, what we can provide for you, and really what you want as a neighborhood, right? So, or as a business community, what would success look like for you, and how can we also help you get there? Our responsibilities, like I mentioned, we coordinate the response. And so we make sure that we have a coordinated effort between all of our partners. There's about 40 partner agencies that we work with. We manage all the data. So one thing people may not know is that anyone providing homeless services, we all enter into a central database. The Homeless Coalition actually manages that data. So if someone goes to Presbyterian Night Shelter one night, for example, and then they go to Salvation Army the next night, and we are able to see both of those things. So we're not siloed, and we can see how people are using resources and what that looks like. As a Homeless Coalition, we also can tell you how our system and how our community is performing. That's really important. One of the things that we do is HUD gives our community about $15 million in housing funds every year. And the Homeless Coalition is responsible for ensuring that our system is performing well and actually drawing down those funds. I say we're a housing matchmaker. A lot of people may think that in homelessness, whenever you experience homelessness, you have to go get an assessment and then you get on a list, the dreaded list of housing. That's not actually how our system works anymore. We really try to match people with the best fit housing. And so it's an automated system. People no longer have a number on a list or we do prioritize different populations, but we run the automated system that actually matches people with housing. So when one of Toby's programs has an opening, they'll tell us, hey, we can take 3 people. And then our system will match whoever's most appropriate for his program with that housing program. And then, of course, we're an advocate for change. So we do a lot of advocacy around directing resources. So looking at, how does our community ensure that we're maximizing all the resources that are coming into specifically to Tarrant County to respond to homelessness, looking and making sure that we're using those resources in the best way possible. And then, of course, advocating for housing. We always advocate for additional housing developments. I'll tell you right now, we're in a really unique position because of CARES, and really because of CARES, we have almost enough housing assistance to assist anyone who experiences homelessness. We have never had this before, so it's really a once in a lifetime opportunity. However, now that our problem has become physical units, so physical units that people could actually live in are now kind of our issue. So we advocate, the Homeless Coalition advocates for all kinds of different things that system-wide we're seeing. So a little bit about homelessness. So on any given day, about 1,200 people experience homelessness in our community. That is significantly down. Typically, I would say for the past, let's call it 10 years, that number has hovered around 2,000. So on the point in time count, we had about 1,200 people who were experiencing homelessness. We sort of thought, okay, is that a fluke because we did the point in time count different, or what happened with that? However, we have seen that continuing throughout this year, it has continued to be about 30 to 40% down from what it typically is. Last year in 2020, our system served over 10,000 people. One thing I
wanted to bring up on the 1,200 people, that is significantly lower than it has been historically. And really the main driver for that, ironically, has been COVID and what's gone along with COVID. People are more willing to allow family members or others stay in their houses or wherever they were living. Also, a couple of other major drivers earlier in the year, that was the eviction moratorium, as well as the additional financial assistance, whether that be from the CARES Act or whether it was unemployment extended benefits. Those have expired in Texas, but we still have not seen a mass return of people entering into homelessness. So give it a little more perspective. We have a family program. It's called the Morris Foundation Family Center, and we serve 40 families at any given time. They each have their own room, 40 families, and we average about 85 children. We are hovering right as of today. We have 32 families, and frankly, that's a little bit high when you look at it from a time period during COVID. Pre-COVID, we were always full. But because of the additional resources that are available, homelessness is down. And so, as Lauren mentioned briefly about the additional dollars from the CARES Act that are in our community, we are really making a push to house as many people possible so that if and when a influx of new people come into the system, we'll be in a better position to meet that need versus not having a big, strong housing push.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say just a note about families, and I'll talk a little bit about who is homeless or who experiences homelessness in our community. Families actually have been a bright spot in COVID. Not oddly, but feels strange to say, they have been a bright spot. They move through our system incredibly well. Our system has really, I won't say perfected because things can always be better, but our system has really done a good job at changing and working to better serve them. They return to homelessness at a pretty low rate, lower than any other population. And they move into housing quicker than most other populations as well. So to give you an idea, I mentioned that about 1,200 people experience homelessness on a given day. So typically, historically, at any given time, we've had about 250 families in our system experiencing homelessness. And throughout COVID, that number has hovered, I would say between 50 and 70. So that's significantly down, which is a really, really good thing. One thing to note, and this is true this year and also in previous years, that our community has not seen explosive growth in homelessness. So even though Tarrant County's population is just going up and up and up, homelessness is not on the same track. So as a percentage of our population, homelessness actually continues to decline. And people can be homeless for days, weeks, months, or years. I think often if we think about homelessness, we think about a person who's on the side of the road in rags, potentially panhandling, when in reality, about a quarter of our population, 30% of our population is homeless for less than 2 weeks. About 20% is homeless for more than a year, and everyone else falls somewhere in between. So we are really committed as a system to moving people out of homelessness as quickly as we can. This just gives you an idea about historically what the point in time count has looked like. So like I mentioned, we typically hover around 2,000 people at any given time. I mentioned that we were at about 1,200 this year. Toby, do you want to talk a little bit about others 1,200? About half of those lived in or were staying in emergency shelter on the night of the count. Do you want to talk a little bit about your other shelters now, Toby, or you want to come back?
I'll be happy to do that, and I can also speak a little bit to our community shelters as well. As Lauren mentioned, homelessness is most associated either with people you see on the streets or emergency shelters, but the system is much broader than that. But specifically to emergency shelters, here at the Presbyterian Night Shelter, we operate shelter-related programs for single or for families, any type of family, single mom, single dad, intact families, grandparents, whatever that family looks like. We also have a program for veterans, 30 men that live in a veterans program. We have a day shelter called True Worth Place, where it's open 7 days a week from 7 to 3. Anyone's welcome to come into the day shelter to receive services. We also have a women's shelter. Our capacity is 160 single women. And then we also have a men's shelter, and our capacity pre and post COVID is 385. It's about 285 during COVID. And so for us at the shelter, we're the largest shelter in North Texas. It's not really a claim to fame, it's just the reality of it. One reason why we tend to have the largest numbers is our philosophy on who we accept. And that's the best thing about the Presbyterian Night Shelter, is that anyone is welcome to access our services. We don't do an intake. We don't require an ID. We don't require a clean background check. We don't require any type of alcohol or drug type situations of being sober. So anyone that needs the help is welcome. And that's the best thing about our organization, is we serve anyone. Other places in Tarrant County would be the Union Gospel Mission. They have shelter services, as well as the Salvation Army, and also the Arlington Life Shelter in Arlington. You have the Center for Transforming Lives. They have a very, very small shelter for women. And then also tend to overlook at times a shelter for youth. And that is operated by ACH Child and Family Services, and they offer emergency shelter for children ages 12 to 18. So that's a brief overview of the shelter system, very brief, within Tarrant County.
Thank you. So the other shelter, sorry, Toby, I'll just mention the other shelter we have is Safe Haven. So Safe Haven is the domestic violence shelter. They have a shelter in Fort Worth and Arlington. So I will say right here, this safe haven on this slide is not the same as domestic violence. Presbyterian Night Shelter, we did not mention that they operate a program called Safe Haven. It has 20 beds for severely mentally ill persons. And that is a really, really important program. We're looking to see how we can potentially expand or add more safe havens to our community. And that really centers around the mental health discussion, right? So years ago, we had institutionalization. Now we've swung over here to where our jails are essentially our mental health institutions. And at some point, our community has got to come back to the middle and say, okay, there are a number of people who cannot live on their own. And so what kind of housing are we going to provide for them? So Toby provides Safe Haven as well. So just some trends I want you to know. We did have a 42% decrease in homelessness. And all of kind of the subpopulations we look at. So unsheltered homelessness is down by about 40%. I know sometimes it may not feel like that. You know, when you see people on the street, what does that mean? Homelessness is and continues to be somewhat, visible. And so we have that push and pull there. 23% decrease in veteran homelessness, 43% decrease in family homelessness, and 32% decrease in chronic homelessness, which is people who have been homeless for more than a year. So Toby talked a little bit about the why, like why do we think, that's a question I get all the time, why do we think homelessness is down? He mentioned the eviction moratorium. There's a lot of increased funding for homelessness and eviction prevention. I will say COVID really created a new level of coordination between government and nonprofits. So they worked really closely with us to understand what we were experiencing and what the need was. There is some fear around congregate settings, and I think that's completely reasonable. And then new housing developments, because of CARES and other funding that's come in, we've actually been able to develop some new housing that we didn't expect to come online. So that's been really, really impactful to our system. So who's homeless? 64% men, 36% women. So primarily single men are our biggest portion of the population. 2.5% children. As I mentioned, the number of families experiencing homelessness is down significantly. 22% of people are part of a family, and then 8% are veterans. People tell us, and this is self-report, we ask them what caused you to become homeless. So people have told us for years the top two, so unemployment and no income, and inability to pay rent. So we have a lot of people who are being priced out of the rental market. I'm sure that looking into economic development, I'm sure that housing is something that you're talking about and thinking about, but just knowing that, low wage earners cannot afford fair market rent. So inability to pay rent is a huge issue. And then physical and mental disabilities is what the third thing that people report. Wanted to let y'all know a little bit about COVID response. Our system had a great COVID response. We've done a lot to keep the population safe. I'm happy to report that we haven't had any significant outbreaks. I will say we're kind of feeling the pain right now. We're like the rest of the community seeing an uptick in cases as well. But our goal has always been to slow the spread of COVID and be able to continue to provide services. So all of our shelters put social distancing in place. They all do health screenings. Outreach teams do as well. And we've really kept our laser focus on housing. So our goal during COVID has been to move people out of homelessness as quickly as we can. And so fewer people are coming in and our system is still moving people out. So I mentioned when I showed you the first slide that we had revamped or had designed homeless services and redone the boards. And I really feel like COVID was kind of a stress test for our system. We were able to respond and quickly make changes. So a couple of ways you can get involved, this is what I wanted to end with, was that so we have membership. So as a homeless coalition, you can, if you want to support the issue of homelessness and be part of the solution, we invite you to join as a coalition member. Definitely share the story. So I would ask you to know the facts. There's public dashboards on our website. You can visit, you can get data anytime. Engage others and tune into different social media accounts. We have a podcast. I also do kind of informational videos. Toby's featured in one of those with partner highlights and just facts about homelessness, things people might be wondering. And then, of course, we encourage you to serve our partners. So volunteer your time, give items that they need. They're always in need of volunteers and items, and of course, contribute financially. So money to actually run their operations is really important as well. So, Daryl, that's it for me. I can stop sharing and then we can have questions or however that typically works.